Imagine I give you 5 million naira, not 50 million naira, not 500 million naira, just 5 million naira. And I tell you, take this money, find 100 mama put vendors, give each of them 50,000 naira, and make sure each person brings back 50,000 naira every day. Sounds simple, Abi. Now, take that 50,000 naira, multiply it by 100 people. That is 5 million naira every single day. Now, multiply that by 365 days, and suddenly you are looking at 1.825 billion naira. Because at this point, your calculator has probably started looking like a business consultant. You are already imagining the office, the Range Rover, the mansion, maybe even the Forbes interview. But there is one small problem. The calculator does not cook the rice. The calculator does not buy tomatoes. The calculator does not pay the food vendor. The calculator does not handle rainy morning day morning. And the calculator does not deal with food spoilage. The calculator does not deal with a generator that suddenly refused to start. And the calculator definitely does not deal with Nigerians. And that is where the real business begins. Recently, music executive Ubi Franklin shared a business idea built around investing in 100 food vendors, giving each 50,000 naira to cook, and collecting 50,000 naira daily from each vendor. On paper, the mathematics look beautiful, but here on Street MBA with Kapick, we don't just ask how much can this make, we ask the more dangerous question: what has to be true for this to actually work? Because a business idea can look like 1.8 billion naira on a calculator and still lose money on the street. Welcome to Street MBA with Kapick. Before we tear anything down, let's be fair, because there is actually a good business idea hidden inside this idea. The concept is based on something serious: deploy capital repeatedly. Instead of putting 5 billion naira in one restaurant, you spread it across 100 small operators. You create a system, you give them working capital, they trade every day, they return money, you recycle capital, and you scale. That principle is not foolish. In fact, it is one of the most important ideas in business. Capital must work. Money sitting down does not create much. Money moving through productive activity can create value. So let's assume, for the sake of argument, that the business is perfectly structured. 100 vendors, 50,000 naira working capital each, total capital 5 million naira, and every day somehow the vendor produce 150,000 naira in sales every day. Then, according to the proposed model, 50,000 naira goes back to the investor. 50,000 naira becomes the vendor earning. 50,000 naira remain as working capital. Do that across 100 vendors, and the investor collects 5 million naira per day. 5 million naira times 365 days, 1.825 billion naira. Mathematically, yes, the multiplication is correct, but business is not just multiplication, because we have not answered the most important question: where did the 150,000 naira come from? Let's pause right here. If you run a food business and you sell 150,000 naira worth of food today, are you automatically making 150,000 naira? Of course not. So why, when we hear this calculation, do we suddenly trade the 150,000 naira like profit? That is the first trap. Revenue is not profit. That is one of the first lessons any serious entrepreneur needs to understand. Sales are not profit. Revenue is the money customer pays you. Profit is what remains after the cost of generating that revenue are removed. Let's take one mama put vendor. She sells 150,000 naira today. Beautiful. But what did she spend? Rice, beans, garri, yam, meat, fish, tomatoes, pepper, onions, oil, seasoning, water, gas, charcoal, electricity, transportation, packaging, maybe rent, maybe a table fee, maybe park related charges, maybe she pays an assistant, maybe she gives food on credit, maybe somebody eats and say, "Madam, I will pay tomorrow," and tomorrow becomes next week. All of these things are part of the business. So if the vendor sells 150,000 naira and spends 100,000 naira producing those meals, her gross profit is not 150,000 naira, it is 50,000 naira, and even that may not be her final profit, because she can still have other operating expenses. That is why business people don't look at turnover and shout, "Wow, this person is making money." Dey look deeper. Street MBA with Kapick lesson here be say revenue tells you how much money pass through the business, profit tells you how much the business actually kept. Never confuse the two. Now let's take this idea out of the calculator and put it inside the real motor park, because the street has something Excel does not have: uncertainty. Imagine you have 100 vendors. Every morning everybody is ready. Vendor number 1 is selling rice, vendor number 2 is selling beans, vendor number 3 is selling amala, vendor number 4 is selling noodles. Everybody has their 50,000 naira. You are smiling, but by 2 p.m. something happen. Rain. Heavy rain, that kind of rain that makes people cancel plans. The park becomes quiet. Some commuters don't travel, some workers go home, some people decide, I will just manage bread today, Joe. Your vendors are still sitting there with all food already cooked, and food has a dangerous characteristics. It has a clock. You can store a laptop, you can store shoes, you can store a chair, but cooked food, time is working against you. The longer it stays, the greater the risk of waste. So now your model has encountered its first enemy: demand risk. This is where the 1.8 billion calculation becomes fragile, because it assumes 50,000 naira times 100 vendors times 365 days, but business does not operate on 365 perfect days. What about Christmas, Eid, public holidays, raining days, fuel shortage, market disruption, transport strike, security problem, equipment breakdown, illness, a vendor child is getting sick, a vendor losing a family member, a vendor simply deciding, I cannot work today? These things don't make the vendor bad, they make the vendor human. And that is one of the big differences between a spreadsheet and a business. A spreadsheet does not get tired, people do. Let me ask you, if 100 people are working for your business, do you honestly expect all 100 people to perform at exactly 100% every single day for one full year? If your answer is no, then we have to adjust the calculation, because assumptions are expenses waiting to happen. So let's go back to the proposed 50,000 naira. The idea assumes give someone 50,000 naira, they cook, they return 150,000 naira. 50,000 naira comes to you, 50,000 naira becomes their earning, 50,000 naira remain in the business. But what exactly is the 50,000 naira being used to buy? If your vendor used the money to buy ingredients, those ingredients must generate enough meals to create the required sales, and those meals must actually sell. That is the missing bridge. The model does not simply depend on capital, it depends on capital plus purchasing plus production plus demand plus pricing plus location plus food cost plus waste control plus labor plus daily discipline. That is business. You cannot just inject money into a business model and assume the money itself will manufacture profits. Now, there is another statement that deserves attention. The idea suggests that these vendors can make something close to 250,000 naira. But let's slow down. If you put 50,000 naira into a business and the business generates 150,000 naira in sales, that is 100,000 naira above the original 50,000 naira. But that doesn't make you made 100,000 naira profit. Why? Because the 150,000 naira is the sales revenue. You still have to account for the cost of generating those sales. If the vendor spends 100,000 naira to generate 150,000 naira in revenue, then the gross profit is 50,000 naira, and after other operating expenses, the net profit could be even lower. So the phrase 250% sounds impressive, but percentage in business must always answer one question: 250% of what? Return of capital, gross margin, markup, revenue, net profit. These are not the same thing, and this is why business language matters. So Street MBA with Kapick lesson be say, whenever someone tell you this business make 200%, don't get excited yet. Ask 200% of what? Because a percentage without a base can make almost any business sound like magic. Now let's give this idea its hardest test. Forget profit for a moment. Let's just talk sales. Can one food vendor generate 150,000 naira in sales every day? Absolutely. Depending on location, product, pricing, customer traffic, and execution, it is possible. But can 100 vendors do it every day for 365 days? That is completely a different question, and that is where scalability becomes difficult, because one successful vendor does not automatically mean 100 successful vendors. You could have one woman who has been selling food in that particular park for 15 years. She knows the drivers, the mechanics, the conductors, the office workers, the commuters, the regular customers. She knows what time food people arrive. She knows what sells. She knows exactly how much rice to cook. She knows when to reduce production. She knows who buys on credit. She knows who won't pay. She has built something money cannot immediately buy: relationship. Now, you come with 100 new vendors, you give them money, but you have not given them an experience, you have not given them a customer relationship, you have not given them a location advantage, you have not given them a reputation, and you definitely have not given them our ability to know. Today, don't cook too much rice. That is operational knowledge, and operational knowledge is money. Let's say you somehow solve demand. You still have another problem: control. You have 100 vendors. Now imagine trying to monitor what each person bought, what each person cooked, what each person sold, what each person wasted, what each person remitted, what each person kept, what each person borrowed, what each person damaged, what each person claims happened. Suddenly, you are not just an investor, you are running a network. A network requires system. You need records, you need daily reporting, you need cash control, you need procurement controls, you need vendor agreements, you need reconciliation, you need someone checking inventory, you need someone supervising location, you need a process for default, you need rules for theft, you need rules for illness, you need rules for absence, you need rules for expansion. And now the 5 million naira investment has become a management business. Here is the question I want you to remember. If your business needs you to personally chase everybody every morning, do you own a business, or have you simply bought yourself 100 jobs? Think about that. Trust is not a business control system, and this is where the street can be brutal. Because people are people. You can have good intentions and still get disappointed. You can give someone 50,000 naira and they may genuinely start well. Then something happens: a family emergency, debt, personal pressure, bad sales, temptation, or perhaps they simply decide your money is easier to disappear with. That is why serious business don't operate on "I trust him." They operate on "I trust him, but the system can still verify you." That is not disrespect, that is management. Even banks, which have sophisticated systems, still reconcile transactions. Even large corporations still conduct audits. Even supermarkets count stock. Why? Because good systems don't assume people are perfect. They are designed to function even when people make mistakes. There is another issue: competition. Imagine you identify a busy motor park. You think, perfect, lot of people, food will sell, but you are not the first person to notice the crowd. There may already be 20 rice seller, 15 bean seller, 10 amala vendors, 5 buka operators, restaurants, fast food spots, street food seller, and people selling bread, egg, noodles and snacks. So now, you don't just have to feed people, you have to convince them to buy from your vendor. And customers are not machines, they have preferences. One likes more meat, one likes cheaper food, one trusts a particular woman, one likes the way another person cooks, one says, "Madam, abeg, give me that other woman food." That is competition. And the customer has the final vote. This is one lesson every entrepreneur needs to understand. You can design the perfect business model, but the customer decides whether it survives. You can say, "I will sell 150,000 naira every day." The customer can say no. You can say, "I will cook 100 portions." The customer can say, "I don't want it." You can say, "I have invested 50,000 naira." The customer does not care. They care about taste, price, quantity, convenience, hygiene, location, trust, experience, and value. That is why entrepreneurship is not simply "what do I want to sell?" It is "what does the customer consistently want to buy?" So, is this idea bad? No. And this is important. We are not here to abuse Ubi Franklin. We are not here to say this man does not know business. That is not the lesson. Actually, there is a valuable principle inside the idea. The principle is take a proven small business model and replicate it across multiple operators. That is powerful. Franchising does something similar. Agent network do something similar. Distribution network do something similar. Microfinance models do something similar. The problem is not the ambition. The problem is the assumption that revenue is equal to profit, and one successful unit times 100 is equal to 100 successful units. It does not work that way. So, if I wanted to turn the idea into a serious business model, I would not start with 100 vendors. I start with one, just one. Give the operator working capital. Define exactly what the money is for. Record every purchase, record every sale, track food waste, track daily revenue, track gross profit, track operating expenses, track net profit, track customer volume, track average transaction value, track the vendor's repayment performance, and then I would observe for 30 days, not 3 days, not 1 week, 30 days. Then I ask what worked, what did not, what was the average daily sales, what was the actual food cost, how much food was wasted, what percentage of sales became profit, how many days did the vendor miss, how much capital was actually required, what caused the biggest loss, and then I improve the model. Then go from 1 to 5. If one vendor works, don't immediately jump to 100. Go to 5. Why? Because 5 vendors will expose problem that one vendor won't. Maybe procurement becomes cheaper. Maybe it becomes harder to monitor. Maybe customers respond differently. Maybe some locations outperform others. Maybe some vendors are excellent and others are terrible. Now you have data. Then you go from 5 to 10, then 10 to 25, then 25 to 50, and only when the system has proven itself do you consider 100. That is how you turn an idea into an operating model. What would the real business look like? Now let's build a more realistic version. Suppose you have 100 vendors, but instead of you assuming every vendor produces the same amount every day, you track actual performance. Some make 150,000 naira, some make 120,000 naira, some make 80,000, some make 60,000 naira, some have bad days, some have excellent days, some close temporarily, some leave, some need replacement. Now you calculate based on actual performance, and more importantly, you calculate revenue, then cost of goods sold, then gross profit, then operating expenses, then net profit. That is the number that matters, because if your network generates 1.8 billion naira in revenue but consumes 1.6 billion naira to operate, you don't have a 1.8 billion naira profit business. You have a business with 1.8 billion naira turnover. That is a completely different conversation. There is something people don't understand about scaling. Scaling does not just multiply revenue, it multiplies problems too. One vendor cheats, you handle one issue. 10 vendor cheats, you have a management problem. One vendor wastes food, one problem. 20 vendors waste food, now your margins are bleeding. One vendor go missing, you replace one. 10 vendors disappear, your operating model has a structural problem. That is why scale without system is just bigger chaos. Remember that too. And the brutality of the street be say, this is the part I really want young entrepreneurs to understand. The street is beautiful, but the street is brutal. The street does not care about your presentation. It does not care about your PowerPoint. It does not care that your calculation is good. It asks one question: will customer pays? If they don't, your model suffers. The street teaches you something very quickly. Cash flow matters, margins matter, stock matters, waste matters, location matters, people matter, trust matters, execution matters, and sometimes even after doing everything right, you can still have a bad day. That is business. So what can we actually learn from this controversial 1.8 billion naira calculation? Lesson 1: don't confuse turnover with profit. A business can sell millions and still struggle. Lesson 2: don't build a business on perfect assumptions. 365 days of perfect performance is not a business plan, it is a dream. Build your model around realistic number. Lesson 3: one successful business does not automatically become 100 successful businesses. Replication require systems. Lesson 4. People are part of the business model. If your model depends on 100 people behaving perfectly, you need control. Lesson 5. Start small and prove the economics. One vendor, then 5, then 10, then scale. Lesson 6. Know your unit economics. Before you ask, how much can I make? Ask, how much does one unit actually make? One vendor, one day, one meal, one customer, one transaction. Know those numbers, then multiply. Let me give you the Street MBA with Kapick formula. Forget the 1.8 billion naira for a minute. If you want to build a scalable business, start here. Unit economics times number of units times operating days times execution. But there's another factor, risk, because if your unit economics are wrong, scaling does not make you richer, it makes you lose money faster. If one vendor loses 10,000 naira every day, 100 vendors can lose 1 million naira every day. That is why scaling a bad business model is dangerous. Don't multiply first, prove first. And this brings us to something deeper. The billionaire mindset is not how can I multiply 50,000 naira by 100 people. That's calculator thinking. The billionaire mindset is what system can consistently produce value, generate healthy margins, survive bad days, and scale without collapsing. That is different. You don't become wealthy because you discover multiplication. You become wealthy by building something that can survive multiplication. That is the difference. Back to the 1.8 billion naira. So let's go back to the opening calculation. 100 vendors, 50,000 naira each, 5 million naira deployed, 50,000 naira supposedly collected daily from each, 5 million naira daily, 1.825 billion naira annually. The calculator says yes, but the street says show me the customer, show me the sales, show me the food cost, show me the waste, show me the vendor salaries, show me the rent, show me the fuel, show me the transportation, show me the days when it rains, show me the days when nobody buys, show me the control, show me the record, show me the actual profit, and after all of that, then show me the 1.8 billion naira. Because business does not reward beautiful calculation, business rewards execution. And maybe that is one of the biggest lessons the street teaches us. Sometimes the person standing beside you with a food flask understand business better than the person making a billion naira projection, not because the food seller is automatically smarter, but because every single day the street gives her an examination. She knows when customers are not coming, she knows when tomatoes are becoming expensive, she knows when to reduce what she cooks, she knows which food moves faster, she knows which customer will return, she knows when to buy, she knows when not to buy. She knows that money entering your hand does not mean money belongs in your pocket, and that is business education. The street can be brutal, but if you pay attention, it can also be one of the greatest classrooms. So I'm not telling you don't invest in food vendors, I'm telling you don't invest in a calculation, invest in a proven system. Don't ask how much will 100 vendors make, ask how much does one vendor actually make after every cost, then ask whether you can produce that result. Because 1.8 billion naira is not a business plan, it is a target. The business plan is everything you must build to make that target possible. My brother, my sister, if this video changed the way you look at business calculations, don't just watch it, send it to that friend who always say, bro, this business will make you billions, and tell them, come, let's calculate the profit first. If you are an entrepreneur, don't be afraid of big ideas. Dream big, but audit the dream, calculate the cost, test the market, measure the numbers, build the system, then scale. Because here on Street MBA with Kapick, we don't keep big dreams, we put them through street reality. If you are new here, subscribe, because we don't just talk business about business theories, we decode the business lessons hidden inside everyday Nigerian life. I be Kapick, and remember, revenue is not profit, scale is not success, and calculator can never replace the street. Stay sharp, stay street smart. I will see you in the next Street MBA with Kapick episode. Apply the lesson learned for today. Washiri.